USPAP. So if you're bound by USPAP, you're bound by USPAP. You might be bound. Probably are bound by USPAP. These are your minimum requirements. They're not suggestions. They're not guidelines. They're requirements. Are you adhering to the applicable development and reporting requirements of USPAP? Are you doing what you're supposed to be doing? And are you ready? It might be changing to some extent. There's definitely changes on the horizon. Come on back and let's have a conversation about it. Hi, this is Bryan Reynolds. You're listening to the Appraisal Update Podcast, brought to you as always by the great folks over at Appraiser eLearning. You need some education? Check us out at AppraiserELearning.com. I am really thrilled and certainly honored to have a guest on today that will educate me probably as much as you. So without further delay, Miss Michelle Bradley. Michelle, thank you so much for being on the program today.
Thank you so much, Bryan. And every opportunity I get to learn something new is good for me too. So thanks for having me, and we'll learn something together.
I just did a podcast with Sean Telford, and we were talking about PREA a little bit. And one of the first comments that came up, a young person said, I don't know if they're young or not, but somebody typed in and said, hey, I think I might do this PREA thing, right? And after I finish, look to associate myself with a certified appraiser to continue. I was so impressed by that, right? This was somebody that if they get through PREA, they'll be certified or licensed or certified, yet they still want to continue that education. And I was really thrilled to see that. That was awesome. So yeah, I'm with you. I love to learn new stuff and never stop learning, right? So Michelle, just real quickly, why don't you tell my listeners and viewers, if they don't know, they probably do, but on the rare chance somebody doesn't know who you are, tell us a little bit about Miss Michelle Bradley.
Oh, well, let's see. Back in the days of the dinosaurs, I was born. My mother likes to tell people my first words were mortgage contingency. I've been in this profession since I was born. My grandmother got into real estate in 1958. So I'm third generation in my family business. I hope this gig works out for me because I don't have any other background.
No backup plan.
My family company now has 4 generations. Although my grandmother has passed, we're into 4 generations. I trained my nephew as an appraiser. So I'm married to an appraiser. My mom's an appraiser. My dad's an appraiser. It's a wonderful profession. I'm a certified general appraiser. I'm also a real estate broker, although I'm old enough to have gotten my broker license from only doing appraisals back in the days before FIREA and certification. And I still actually am a boots on the ground practicing appraiser. That is my livelihood. This is an amazing profession. Bryan, if you just give me 1 second to say, I just had a real estate agent call me yesterday and said she wanted to become an appraiser. And she had a few appraisers that she talked to, and they told her, no, you don't want to do this. And she called me. And I said, this is a phenomenal profession. I'm sorry that a couple told you not to. But boy, there is so much opportunity. And Bryan, you mentioned PREA. We are on the cusp of such a phenomenal shift in our profession. We can harness technology. I heard you talking to Sean Telford the other day. Yep. I watched that podcast. Great one, by the way. We can harness technology. We have the opportunity to expand the profession with who can come in and how they can come in. And the profession has so many opportunities. It's not just real property residential appraisal. It's not just real property commercial appraisal. You can get into all kinds of specialties with eminent domain. You can get into personal property. You can get into machinery and equipment. You can work for a bank. You can work for yourself. There are so many opportunities. I can't understand why people aren't, flooding the gates to get into this profession.
Yeah.
So if you're out there wondering, get in. It's an amazing profession.
And I'll just echo what Michelle said exactly, right? It's when, if I was a kid when I was a kid, and somebody said, Brian, when you grow up, you're going to have a job that people will pay you money to tell them what you think. Wait a minute. Is this a real job? I mean, I can just tell people what I think and I get paid. I mean, get your checkbook out. I can tell you what I think all day long, right? So it to me, I agree with you, Michelle. It's the best profession on the planet. We've had some challenges, and we'll always have some kind of challenge, right? And challenges with work and other things. So let's talk about USPAP for a minute, because that is our
dear to my heart.
I know you know a little something about this topic. So we have been under the 2020-2021 edition, right? And then it went through 2022, and we said, we don't know what's going to happen with 2023. Well, that little sticker tells us now that it's through 2023, but 2024, something new is coming out, right? So talk a little bit about when in 2024, when does the new USPAP become effective?
So the new USPAP becomes effective January 1st of 2024. But let me just take you on a little history ride back in the day. For those of you that might not remember, USPAP used to be in a 3-ring binder, and you used to get a new update and you just change out the paper in the 3-ring binder. Then it went to 1 year, then 18 months, then 2 years. I just want to point out, before I jump into the 2024 USPAP, let me just point out that the 2020 edition was 4 years. Unprecedented. And now, because USPAP has matured, it takes longer for the ASB to analyze and consider different topics. So the 2024 new unprecedented, no end date. And that is such a huge thing. So I'm going to get into what's in the 2024 edition, but I just have to pause and say the 2024 edition, no end date.
So let me make sure I understand this, and the listeners understand. So this one said 2020 to 2021, which means it was good till the end of 2021. Some things happened, you extended and it got extended again, but there was an end date, right? The time in which this is no longer effective. And generally speaking, most of the appraisers have now come to know USPAP as a 2-year document, right? It comes out, typically it would come out in the even years, right? And last for 2 years. So folks are probably thinking, unless they have heard it elsewhere or hear it today, 2024 will be the 2024-2025 edition of USPAP, and then 2026, something else will come out. And that's not true. There'll be no end date on the cover of the new book, right? It'll just say 2024.
That is 100% correct. It's the 2024 edition of USPAP with no end date. And that is unprecedented. And it's because USPAP has matured. We don't need to do continual updates. And the topics that come before the ASB now are much more important in terms of it takes a lot more research. I don't mean that other stuff wasn't important. I just mean that, we were faced for this 2024 edition, we were faced with an ethics rule update.
Right.
It's never been updated like this before. So it took a lot more time, which is the reason why it had to be extended to 4 years. So that edition was a full 4-year edition. It was only planned for 2. But again, because of the modification necessary to the ethics rule and the unprecedented, keep using that word because boy, that's where I live right now, unprecedented territory. There was so much research, so much analysis, so much reach out, give and take, discussions with people. We met with appraisers, we met with regulators, we met with advisory groups, industry advisory councils. We met with professional membership groups. All kinds of organizations and individuals in order to properly go through all the topics necessary to analyze what needed to be in the ethics rule. So I'm really proud of what the ASB did, and I'm really proud to be part of this ethics role and the new course. I know we're going to get to talk about that
Yeah,
in a minute.
absolutely, absolutely. And so just so the listeners know, Michelle is the chair of the Appraisal Standards Board, right? So she knows a little something about not only USPAP, but the process and everything involved with it. And you have some unprecedented a few times. We had 5 exposure drafts for this one too, which I think is unprecedented, isn't it? Isn't that the most exposure
Yeah.
draft? Yeah, yeah.
So I think there might have been one other time
Okay.
that there was 5 exposure drafts, but um, this is such an important topic. The ethics of our
Uh-huh.
profession. That goes right back to the preamble of USPAP. It goes back to the public trust issue.
Right.
If we don't have public trust in our profession, what do we have?
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, I've been chair of the Appraisal Standards Board now. I'm in my 3rd year as chair of the ASB. It is a wonderful opportunity to participate. Of course, I'm a AQB certified USPAP instructor, as well as I know you are, Bryan.
Mhm.
And I want to get to the fact that the instructor recertification course is going to be coming out soon.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
many topics to discuss, and we
I
only
know.
have a short time.
I know we do. We do. We could spend all day talking on this stuff. I know for a fact. Hey, so I don't want to get off the exposure for just a second because I want my listeners and viewers to know that not only the ASB but the AQB really values input from practicing appraisers. I mean, I hear appraisers all the time complain. Let's face it, a lot of appraisers like to complain, and I always say, well, why don't you do something about it? Why don't you get involved? And they're like, well, I don't have time for that. Well, you have time to write a letter or an email, right? So talk about that real quick. If somebody has an idea, or, I mean, it's a little late for 2024, but you guys will revisit topics brought before you in the future for sure. Talk about that process and how it works, just real quickly.
I'm really glad you asked that question because, boy, sometimes people will say, well, I'm not going to write a letter. They're not going to listen. I promise you, the ASB reads and learns that works to understand every letter. We don't want to surround ourselves with yes people. We want the feedback, positive as well. That's nice to have on occasion, but the opposition comments, the comments about how we can work to tweak the language to make it even more understandable. That's really helpful. The ASB, AQB as well, but I don't speak for them. The ASB does not operate in a vacuum. And we did have many people reach out and say, hey, did you consider this? Did you consider that? We absolutely, positively beg for people to write those letters to us. We
Yeah,
want to hear from that because the worst thing that can happen is we adopt something and there's some type of unintended consequence that we didn't
right,
consider.
right.
So truly, we may not always agree, but respectfully and professionally, the ASB is charged with analyzing everything from every angle. And in the best interest of public trust, that's what gets adopted.
What's in? I'll be teaching a class, and they're like, "Well, why'd they do this? They shouldn't have done this. They should have." Well, did you make an inquiry? Did you write a letter? Did you attend some of their pub? No. Okay, then be quiet. I don't want to hear it. But what I love about it is that you do value opinions by stakeholders and practicing appraisers. I tell appraisers all the time, you can shape the future of the appraisal
Yes.
profession if you get involved. And I really believe that, and I know that you guys take those to heart. So let's get into some of the changes. And I know, they have to take a 7-hour class to really kind of go over the changes, and we can't do that in 20 minutes here. But can you give us a couple of examples of some of the changes that will take place January 1?
Absolutely. First, I want to say one thing, Bryan. You said in a class you told people, "Hey, if you didn't participate, then you shouldn't be giving your opinion now." Hey, you can still email the ASB at appraisalfoundation.org, ASB at appraisalfoundation.org. If there is a question that somebody has about something that was adopted and it's not working for them, we still want to hear that because that needs to be taken into account for potential future editions. So just tell them to send us a note, ASB at appraisalfoundation.org. Want to highlight the change to the ethics rule. Absolutely, certainly. So if we can just go back for a second, why did this all come up? Appraisers have said to me, to other members of the ASB, hey, it already said in the ethics rule we can't be biased. That's true, but there was nothing explicit in there. And the ASB did research and realized that what was in the current ethics rule didn't go to the depth and the breadth that was necessary to show what the appraiser's obligations are related to non-discrimination scenarios. So the ASB undertook a very, and I mean very, substantial analysis of the ethics rule, reach out sessions on a continual basis. And you mentioned already, Bryan, 5 exposure drafts. And I'm actually proud of the 5 exposure drafts. I heard somebody say, wow, maybe after the 5th one, maybe they'll get the wording right. Hey, that's exactly right. We're trying to get the wording right. And I'm proud of the fact that it was 5 exposure drafts, because that shows how we did the reach out. That shows that we were listening to people's suggestions and comments. So what is in this new ethics rule? There is an entire new section called the non-discrimination section of the ethics rule. And it explicitly mentions the Fair Housing Act, the Equal Credit Opportunity Act, and the Civil Rights Act of 1866. And you're not going to have to know every word of all of those laws. But what you have to learn about is how those laws relate to the appraiser or the appraiser's assignment. And that's the difference. So a lot of people are saying, well, why do I have to learn about these laws? Well, remember, we didn't change the competency rule. The competency rule already required the appraiser to know the laws that apply to the appraiser or to the assignment. So although the ethics rule has a much more explicit requirement called the non-discrimination section, this is already contained in the competency rule. So I'm real excited about how we've made an explicit requirement. So anyone that's outside of our profession, they can open up, I keep my book right next to me too. USPAP.
I figured.
Right. I keep all of them. I go back all the way. I have a copy of every one. I'm kind of a geek like that.
Yep.
But anyone outside of our profession can point to a section and say, oh, I know what the appraiser is supposed to do. Remember, this goes back to public trust. This goes back to what are the appraiser's obligations.
So one change that occurred, I was pretty excited about. I know you and I had talked.
I know what you're going to say.
I know you and I've talked about it several times. So talk about the rationale of getting rid of that one definition.
I knew you were going to ask me about the misleading definition. Yeah. So one thing I want to make sure I cover is when a word is defined in USPAP, it has a specific meaning in the publication. And we heard from many stakeholders that the definition of misleading was causing some concern. Some people were saying, well, is it misleading if you have a typo in the address? The Appraisal Standards Board did put out a frequently asked question about that. But in the analysis of developing the 2024 USPAP, we certainly looked at all sides of this discussion. And we made the determination that the definition should be retired. So what does that mean? Well, that means that goes back to the Common English Dictionary definition of misleading.
Right, right. Which I know, and you and I had several conversations
Oh,
about it. I remember, I think we were up in Ohio, bumped into each other at a lecture
yeah,
event
yeah.
up there, and we're talking about, you were talking about the box, and I certainly understood and respected your position on that. But, I think the concern was a lot of state regulatory boards might enforce things a little bit differently than what your intent was. And anyway, it's gone, it's done, it's over with. Hey, I want to talk to you about the guidance material. I want to talk to you
Oh,
about
yeah.
the 7-hour class. And so think about that, and I'll come right back to you. Ladies and gentlemen, since 1978, LI Administrators and Insurance Services has been offering E&O insurance to valuation professionals. LI applies superior customer service, exceptional liability education, and unbelievable claim defense to serve over 10,000 real estate professionals all across the country. They offer commercial bond, general liability, cyber liability coverage. Whew, that's a hard one. And much, much more. Visit liability.com to learn more about how LIA can help protect you and your business. And I just want to give another thank you to LIA. You've continued to support the Appraisal Update podcast, and we much appreciate that. Thank you very much, LIA. All right, Miss Michelle, talk about guidance material. Number one, what is guidance material, and why was a decision made to do something different with that material?
I'm really glad you asked that too. So when the 2024 USPAP comes out, it is literally going to be the 2024 USPAP. The book is going to be about that big, and everybody's going to realize how little and small USPAP really is. All the guidance material is going to be in a separate book. It's going to be called the Guidance and Reference Manual, for short, GRM. I know appraisers love the acronym GRM. So what was the decision? Why did that happen? Well, that was because, again, there's no end date to USPAP. So if we promulgate this book, we still needed to be able to be responsive to stakeholders and issue guidance as necessary. Well, we're not going to, we have a static book, 2024 USPAP with no end date. So we had to remove all that guidance material out of there and put it in its own separate book so that guidance material can be updated as necessary and be responsive to stakeholders. So that guidance book can update, but USPAP can stay static. And I love that.
Yeah. So it's the frequently asked questions and the advisory opinions. Those are going to live in a different document. That's what I'm hearing, right? And
yes, that's
really
right. And that's not enforceable. Remember,
right,
that's not enforceable material.
I throughout my classes and when I bump into folks, what I used to do is just pull up. It's 58 pages. I'm like, this is USPAP. All this other stuff is advice. And their eyes glisten. But I go on to say it's pretty good advice. It comes from the Appraisal Foundation, and although an advisory opinion or an FAQ aren't binding, they reference portions of USPAP that are binding. So it's really good advice. Advisory Opinion 21 is my favorite. I reference that one all the time, and we certainly use the FAQs as well. So, but that's interesting to know. So the book's going to be shorter, and the book will, a lot of people call it the Bible, right? So the book is going to be the book of your requirements, right? And depending on your discipline, it may be shorter in certain areas than other. So talk about the class. A lot of the listeners and viewers know we have a new class going to be coming. Talk about when that's going to be available. You mentioned the recertification for instructors, and I haven't gotten anything on that yet. So I know normally it's about October-ish when we normally get that. So talk a little bit about when the class is coming out, and I have people say, well, my renewal's not going to be until the end of 2025. Listen, nothing prohibits you from taking the class early. And if your requirements kick in January 1st, are you not going to do any appraisals between now and the end of 2025? And so the appraisers can actually take the education at or near the time it becomes effective. Remember, these are your minimum requirements. If they change January 1st, you kind of need to know what the requirements are to make sure you are adhering to those requirements. So talk about the 7-hour course. When is it available, and And you alluded that it's going to be a little different this time.
Yes, it is. So first, I have to say, if I could be queen for one day, it would be my idea would be every appraiser takes it before it becomes effective. So
Mm-hmm.
they'd take it in
Yeah.
December of this year, December of 2023. But yeah, this one is very different because what we really did was make sure that it's hands-on, it's interactive, and it's really, really specific to day-to-day practice. This is not a boring class by any stretch of the imagination. I personally don't think any of them are boring, but so we highlight that for 2.5 hours of the 7 hours, there will be the explanation of the non-discrimination section of the ethics rule. I have truly never been more excited for a 7-hour course in my entire appraisal career because it's so interactive, this particular one. One of the things that this class does is it presents a topic, and there might not be a yes or no, right or wrong answer. It is going to be up to the instructor to lead the students through how do we research this? Where do we go in USPAP to find this information? I so often see appraisers post on social media a question that is clearly in a frequently asked question in
Mm.
USPAP or clearly in USPAP itself. And we thought, well, why are appraisers turning to social media? Their wonderful book is right in front of them. They can learn to go right into here and get that answer, and that's the definitive source right here. So the class is very interactive and very, very helpful. You mentioned the instructor recertification course. So you are right, Bryan. It comes out in just a few short weeks, typically early October. So all of the AQB certified USPAP instructors have to go through a recertification process so that they can teach the course. All of the instructors will be getting emails pretty shortly. Again, we're halfway through September, if you can possibly believe that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so the instructors will recertify. There is plenty of time. And any appraiser or anyone else that wants to take this course, I really, truly, truly highly recommend you take this course when it becomes available. Don't wait until right before you have to renew your certification. This course is truly a different type of USPAP course, and I couldn't be more excited about it.
That's great. That's great, Michelle. What you finally got this off your plate. I mean, this was a long 4 years for the
Oh
ASB,
yeah, it
and
was.
thank you for all your work that you do. I know you probably don't hear that enough, but you're pretty special and awesome at what you do. So thank you for all that you do. Is the ASB members now, or the ASB board just going to take a month vacation now? Just relax, or so what's on the agenda for the ASB now that this heavy
Oh
lifting
my
is
gosh.
finally over with? What's happening with you
I
guys
am
now?
so glad you asked that because actually that's a very intuitive question because now that we're not going to immediately jump into what changes are needed or necessary for public trust, what we're really going to do is turn towards guidance. That means we truly want more interaction with people like you, Bryan, and all of your listeners and everyone else out there. We truly want to spend our monthly conference calls sifting through questions and topics just to kind of pepper a little bit about what we're working on right now. There are topics about Airbnb and short-term rentals that the
Mm.
ASB is working on a question and answer about that related topic. Another one we're working on is the chat features, the artificial intelligence. Can it write an appraisal for me? What are the pros and cons, and what are the USPAP concerns about that? So there's all kinds of questions that come to the ASB, and that's what the guidance is really all about. So yeah, the guidance isn't enforceable, but the guidance gives you some USPAP references to very specific topics that appraisers deal with in their daily practice. So the ASB is morphing away from changes to USPAP and focused on really helping the appraiser in their practice by developing and issuing guidance.
Michelle, that's great. And I, for one, I can't wait for you guys to come out with the guidance, especially on those two topics you just mentioned, because those are two hot topics. And I'm interested, very interested to see what the foundation has to say about that. You know, the other thing is that, you know, you guys welcome the letters and the ideas and suggestions from appraisers. And just in closing, talk about your meetings that you have. Those are open to the public, right? If an appraiser wanted to either come or if they're live stream participate, how could they get more information on that?
Oh, thanks for asking that. So the live public meetings are virtual. Free. That is my favorite price, free.
Yeah, me too.
So the live, the foundation used to hold the ASB and the AQB meetings in person. Then COVID happened. Oh, COVID, right? And the foundation learned that, wow, live streaming these meetings, there's a lot more accessibility for people to come. So you can go right onto the foundation's website. That's appraisalfoundation.org. You can see the meetings and register. So typically the ASB and the AQB, again, I don't speak for the AQB, but they have, I believe, a minimum of 2 live meetings annually. Anybody can attend. Anybody. We have non-appraisers. We've had people from the public who just happened across it and they called in and asked a few questions. So it's open to everyone. And I highly encourage your attendance because, especially to your listeners, Bryan, this is your profession. Right. This is your profession. It's really important everybody be involved.
Absolutely. Well, I think a lot of the appraisers are going to be excited to hear that there's not an end date, right? Because that was a common complaint I got too, Michelle. It's like, gosh, just about the time I figure USPAP out and I feel good about it, they change it again, right? Can we just not have changes all the time? And so,
well, here we are, Bryan.
We made it, right? We made it.
4 years, the current one, and no end date for this one, right. And an extremely interactive 7-hour course that's going to really, truly teach appraisers how to go into that publication and find the answers to your daily practice questions. I couldn't be more proud and I couldn't be more excited for us as a profession.
That's fantastic. Michelle, you're going to have to come back and join me again. I love talking to you. I love talking about this topic. And if we have you back on, let's talk about USPAP from the perspective of the opportunities for appraisers within that document. I mean, it really, I tell appraisers all the time, you could do almost anything. Now, I didn't say you could do anything. I said you could do almost anything. And USPAP gives you that flexibility. So I'd love to dive in that another time with you because there's a tremendous amount of opportunities within that publication for the practicing appraiser.
Yeah, let me just say, this is when I used to teach USPAP. As ASB chair, I cannot teach USPAP. But when I did, I used to stand up and hold my book up like this and say, see how flexible USPAP is?
I love it. I love it. I love it. Michelle Bradley, chair of the ASB, thank you so much for spending some time with me today. If someone would like to reach out to you personally or directly, is there an email address or something that they could contact Miss Michelle?
Yes, so you can send to the foundation at asb@appraisalfoundation.org. If you have a specific question for me that's not related to me being chair of the ASB, just a personal question for me, I don't mind sharing my email address because I have a lot of students that email me all the time. My personal email is mbradley@crehomes.com. mbradley@crehomes.com.
Michelle Bradley, thank you so very much for spending some time with me today and the great information you shared with my viewers and listeners.
Have a great day, Bryan.
Ladies and gentlemen, you've been listening to the Appraisal Update podcast, brought to you as always by the great folks over at Appraiser eLearning. Until next time, be safe, make some money, think about some of these other disciplines Miss Michelle was talking about: arbitration, mediation, personal property. There's so many opportunities for you with the knowledge and skill set that you have as an appraiser. Think about expanding that into other things. Until next time, for Michelle Bradley, I'm your host, Bryan Reynolds. Happy appraising.
The Appraisal Update podcast is brought to you by Appraiser eLearning.